step into the bustling streets of 1920s Mount Olive, Alabama, and imagine a crisp September day in 1923. That's when Hiram Hank Williams makes his grand entrance into the world, an unsuspecting baby who's about to change American music forever. Except nobody, least of all his poor parents, knows that this tiny bundle of potential is carrying a secret affliction buried in his spine. Spina bifida occulta, so mild it escapes immediate detection, but severe enough to cast a looming shadow over his life. Picture the cotton fields, the distant hum of church bells on Sunday, neighbors greeting neighbors on rickety porches, and, in the middle of it all, baby Hank, cradled by a family that has no idea how drastically pain will shape him. This is a community that does what it can to survive, and for Hank, survival will soon become the only game he knows how to play. That birth defect, hidden so well at first, is the first storm cloud in a whole series of storms that are going to roll through his short, tempestuous life. As the years unspool, each tragedy sets him on a trajectory where heartbreak and brilliance collide, forging him into a legend whose name still resonates. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's a long, winding road from Mount Olive to heartbreak ballads on the radio. From the baby with a hidden spinal condition to the man who becomes an American icon, seemingly overnight. Hank's earliest years are a blend of innocence and lurking misfortune. He's too young to comprehend this condition that causes him periodic twinges and aches. So instead, he just grapples with a mysterious discomfort in his back. It's not enough to stop him from roaming the dusty yards or playing with neighborhood kids, but it flares up unpredictably, a painful flicker that foreshadows an adulthood spent trying to mask what nature cursed him with. He's also too young to appreciate the weight of the Great Depression that's gradually squeezing the life out of rural Alabama. He does, however, notice that times are tough. People don't have enough to eat, jobs are scarce, and folks cling to every scrap of hope. Churches fill up on Sundays with prayers for better luck, for menial jobs, for a break from desperation. It's in these humble beginnings, with the world so precariously balanced, that Hank first learns how to be resourceful. Pain, poverty, and the unknown merge into a daily reality that he can only interpret with a child's eyes. And then, just as his family tries to dig in their heels against the onslaught of bad times, another blow strikes, the one that robs Hank of stability and male guidance at the age of 6. Alonzo Lon Williams, Hank's father, succumbs to a brain aneurysm and subsequent complications, forcing him into a veterans hospital for years on end. It's 1929 and Hank's about 6, wide-eyed and clueless about what it means to be truly abandoned. One day Dad is around, the next day he's just gone. Hospitals don't make sense to a child. All Hank knows is that his father is no longer there to tuck him in or teach him how to bait a fishing hook. The family dynamic shifts dramatically, placing Hank in the sole care of his mother Lily, during an era when single mothers in rural Alabama are almost as scarce as prosperity. The open, lonely fields suddenly feel wider than ever. In later years, when Hank croons lyrics about loneliness so raw it can make a grown man cry, he's reaching back to these early memories, these first pangs of desertion, the sense of isolation, of having a piece of your emotional puzzle missing, becomes a hallmark of his artistry. If you've ever listened to I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, you're practically hearing the echo of that fatherless boy from 1929, standing in a dusty yard, looking off to a horizon that offers no answers. The departure of Lon Williams might look like a singular event on a timeline, but it's actually the chiseling of Hank's emotional bedrock, shaping him into the man who'd know heartbreak intimately. and spin it into gold for the rest of us. But little Hank doesn't have the luxury of wallowing. With Dad out of the picture, survival becomes even more urgent. Enter Lily Williams, a strong-willed woman who decides that if fate isn't going to be kind, she'll fight tooth and nail to wrestle some security out of this life. She sees something in her son. Maybe it's that spark in his voice when he sings, or the sense that performing could be his ticket out of poverty. She starts pushing him toward local performances, street corners, wherever he can gather a crowd and bring in a few coins. It seems innocent enough at first. A boy with a guitar, strumming tunes in front of a grocery store or out on the sidewalk. Neighbors toss him nickels, and Hank gets a taste of applause. But soon, Lily's management style, driven by desperation perhaps, veers dangerously close to exploitation. She signs Hank up for radio gigs, notably on WSFA in Montgomery, where a 13-year-old boy's bedtime goes out the window, replaced by the demands of a budding star. Imagine the early mornings, the late nights, the hunger, the reality of a child trying to keep pace with adult schedules. All the while that hidden spinal condition is gnawing at him, but there's no time to address it. The show must go on, and Lily is determined that her son's voice will be the meal ticket that keeps them afloat. By the mid-1930s, the family is bouncing between small Alabama towns like Georgiana and Greenville, chasing opportunities, hoping to land bigger and better gigs. But the money never seems enough, and the routine is unforgiving. There's a certain harshness in Lily's approach. Little Hank's schooling takes a back seat, overshadowed by the potential to earn a few dollars with every performance. And with child labor laws or health concerns not exactly a priority in their environment, Hank is left to push through growing pains on his own, physical and emotional. He's just a teenage boy navigating constant uprooting, missing out on normal friendships, normal laughter, and normal teenage mischief. Instead, he's learning how to drink whiskey from older musicians who treat it like a rite of passage. The coping mechanism that starts as a simple sip after a show to soothe a sore back and calm stage nerves will later spiral into full-blown addiction. These are Hank's formative years, shaped by applause, overshadowed by maternal pressure, filled with the rootless hustle from one radio station to another. In a story so often marked by tragic relationships, one stands out as a bright spot, albeit a short-lived one. Rufus T-Tot Payne, an African-American street musician in Greenville, crosses paths with Hank and sees a flicker of genuine talent in the skinny white kid who's eager to learn. Hank, in turn, sees in T-Tot a paternal figure he lacks. And it isn't just fatherly guidance that T-Tot offers, it's an entire musical lexicon, a direct pipeline to the blues tradition. While Hank might later be billed as the quintessential country singer, it's the blues that lace his melodies with soul-wrenching authenticity. Imagine teenage Hank perched on a crate, guitar in lap, eyes wide, absorbing chord progressions, vocal nuances, and a way of feeling the music that transcends formal lessons. It's a revelation. The lines between blues and country blur, forging a distinctly American sound that Hank refines into hits later in life. But tragedy has a habit of creeping in. T-Tot dies in the late 1930s, taking with him the mentorship Hank so desperately relies on. The man who offered Hank a gentle presence, something no one else seemed equipped to give, suddenly vanishes. It's yet another emotional blow, another instance of someone meaningful disappearing before Hank's ready to let go. He'll forever credit Rufus Payne for gifting him the core of his music, but how sad it is that such gratitude blossoms when the teacher can no longer witness the pupil's success. Come the 1940s, Hank's on the cusp of adulthood, and the world beyond Alabama's borders is in chaos. War rages in Europe and the Pacific, but for Hank Williams, the most immediate battles are personal. He's got a growing reputation as a singer, thanks in large part to his mother's relentless networking, and he's introduced to a woman who will become both muse and tormentor, Audrey Shepherd. Their courtship has a rough and tumble quality to it, not exactly the sweet, idyllic romance that ballads are made of, though, ironically, it'll inspire countless heartbreak tunes. When they get married in 1944, it's at a gas station in Andalusia, Alabama, which might as well be a neon sign flashing warning, this union is going to be complicated. Audrey is an aspiring singer, and while she adores Hank's talent, she also sees an opportunity to hitch her own wagon to his rising star. There's genuine passion, sure, but also an undercurrent of jealousy, ambition, and clashing egos. She pressures Hank to let her sing alongside him, to share the spotlight on stage, but her talent, bless her heart, is nowhere near Hank's. Audiences come for the heartbreak king, not the shaky-voiced queen. Inevitably, the marriage becomes a minefield. They fight bitterly, fueled by alcohol and insecurity. Add in the heartbreak of a miscarriage in 1948, an event that fractures them to the core, and you've got a union teetering on the brink. Hank writes Cold, Cold Heart, a raw anthem that basically distills the acrimony simmering between them. Infidelity rears its head. Audrey finds comfort in other men. Hank finds consolation in women who adore him from a distance. And together they create a toxic stew of betrayal and rage. By 1952, the marriage is on life support. A violent incident, Audrey firing a gun at Hank during one of their many drunken fights, signposts just how out of control things have gotten. Finally, they divorce in May of that same year, leaving Hank reeling. He's not just losing a wife, he's losing a complicated muse, a partner in chaos, a mother figure to his child, and, in a sense, the last thread of domestic normalcy he's been clinging to. The heartbreak from this split becomes another accelerant for the flames of his drinking problem, pushing him further down a spiral that's already well underway. We can't talk about Hank's downfall without shining a harsh spotlight on his addiction. From the moment he took that first sip to numb the back pain spina bifida occulta inflicted, to the time morphine needles started pricking his arm, Hank is steadily engulfed by substance abuse. By 1951, the meltdown is obvious to anyone paying attention. He's missing shows, stumbling on stage, and alienating the very people who championed him. Grand Ole Opry membership, the prized achievement for any country musician, is soon ripped away. Fired in August 1952, he's effectively told he's too unreliable to represent country music's most hallowed institution. Think about that for a moment. Hank Williams, whose songs will define the genre for generations to come, is booted out because he can't keep it together. If that isn't a red flag waving wildly in his face, nothing is. But addiction doesn't care about warnings. It marches on, morphing from alcohol to morphine to chloral hydrate, anything that dulls the physical and emotional pain. The blow of losing his Opry spot coincides with the final collapse of his marriage to Audrey. For a man who built his identity around music and family, it's the equivalent of having the floor pulled out from under him. He's left dazed, wandering from gig to gig, propped up by his new manager or by well-meaning friends who can't control the carnage. It's a painfully public unraveling. Each missed performance, each drunken brawl, each slurred radio interview, a fresh reason for fans to worry and critics to gossip. As 1952 grinds forward, Hank's world becomes a vortex of lawsuits, financial troubles, and misguided attempts to find stability. Without the Grand Ole Opry's steady paychecks, and with half his future royalties now promised to Audrey in the divorce settlement, money becomes tight. He's sued by his booking agency for failing to show up at gigs. Creditors knock on his door, demanding the cash he doesn't have. In the midst of this chaos, he meets Billie Jean Jones, a young woman who seems to represent a chance at a clean slate, or at least a new distraction from his heartbreak. With characteristic impulsiveness, Hank marries her in October 1952. But the ceremony quickly gets tangled up in legal disputes as questions arise about whether her previous divorce was finalized. The whole fiasco feels like a tragic replay of the messy personal life Hank can't escape. This marriage doesn't herald a new beginning so much as it deepens the turmoil. It's a swirl of confusion. Who's Hank Williams legally married to? Will the courts even recognize this union? Is Billie Jean another caretaker figure, stepping in where Lily and Audrey left off? And while these questions swirl, Hank's health deteriorates by the day, not just from the pills and whiskey, but from constant emotional whiplash, lawsuits, heartbreak, a brand new wife who might not be officially his wife, and a battered body that can't take much more. If there's a rock bottom, Hank is about to crash into it at full speed. The final months of 1952 leading into the new year are a crescendo of disaster. Hank, reeling from a bar fight in which he's reportedly kicked in the groin, is battered physically. His mother Lily disapproves of his new wife, adding fuel to the familial tension. Friends keep urging him to clean up his act, but the pain, physical, spiritual, existential, seems too great to overcome. Every time he steps on stage, the audience sees a legend and a broken man rolled into one. He might still deliver a transcendent performance, but backstage he's sinking deeper. There's no father to turn to. Lon is still institutionalized in a veterans hospital, the father figure role never having been fulfilled. There's no motherly consolation. Lily is busy meddling in his affairs, clashing with Billie Jean, or else watching helplessly as her son deteriorates. There's no reliable friend to intervene. Ruth Payne died years ago. The downward spiral is unstoppable, or so it seems. And then comes the final day of 1952, an ice storm, a show cancellation, a last-ditch plan to get Hank to a performance in Canton, Ohio, by car, courtesy of a 17-year-old driver named Charles Carr. What happens next has the ring of folklore. Hank checks into the Andrew Johnson Hotel in Knoxville on December 31st. A doctor administers shots of vitamin B12 mixed with morphine, an attempt to rouse him from the clutches of alcohol and chloral hydrate to make him remotely functional for the next gig. Hotel porters carry him to his Cadillac, his slender frame bundled up and half-conscious. The roads are icy, the night is dark, and as the car heads toward West Virginia, Hank slips in and out of consciousness. Somewhere between Knoxville and Oak Hill, he goes quiet for the last time. It's in the dead of night or maybe the early hours of January 1st, 1953. By the time Charles Carr stops at a gas station in Oak Hill, West Virginia, Hank is unresponsive, eternally still. Rushed to Oak Hill Hospital, he's pronounced dead at 7 a.m. The official cause, heart failure, likely aggravated by a lethal mix of painkillers, booze, and exhaustion. He's 29 years old, though his ghostly pallor and the pain etched into his body suggest he's lived a lifetime. In a final twist of tragic poetry, the location and exact timing of his death become hazy, debated for decades. Did he die in Knoxville? Was it near Bristol? Did his last breath slip away under the Tennessee sky or the West Virginia hills? Nobody knows for sure, adding one last chapter of mystery to a life soaked in sorrow and speculation. Back in Montgomery, news of Hank's death spreads like wildfire. Fans are stunned. It's unthinkable that the man who gave them songs like "Hey, Good Lookin'" and "I Saw the Light" is suddenly gone. On January 4th, 1953, some 20,000 mourners converge on the Montgomery Auditorium for the largest funeral the state has ever seen. Streets are gridlocked, and inside the auditorium, the sorrow is palpable. His casket rests beneath a sea of flowers, while an endless line of admirers passes by, offering tearful goodbyes. The radio stations play his records on loop, a poignant soundtrack to the shock of losing a titan so young. In a haunting twist, his single, "I'll Never Get Out of This World," Alive, released just before his death, catapults to the top of the charts as if mocking the brevity of his existence. Then come more posthumous hits. "Your Cheatin' Heart," "Cowliga," "Take These Chains From My Heart." They dominate the airwaves, each one punctuating the eerie truth that Hank Williams is more alive in death, at least in terms of musical influence, than he was in his final months of misery. People talk about what-if scenarios. What if Hank had gotten a handle on his addictions? What if a better medical diagnosis for his spinal condition had given him relief from the pain? What if he'd found healthier ways to deal with heartbreak instead of drowning in whiskey? Would he have redefined country music even more, bridging the gap between blues and honky-tonk to create an entirely new genre? These questions linger in smoky bar rooms, wherever country music is played, in quiet living rooms where families pass down old vinyl records, in the studios of modern stars who still name-drop Hank as an inspiration. Yet for all the speculation, the hard truth remains. He was 29 when his heart gave out, leaving a complicated legacy that includes 55 top 10 singles and 12 that hit number one. One all within a roughly 6-year span of recording. That body of work is staggering, and the heartbreak that fueled it is almost inhuman. Posthumously, he becomes bigger than life, a martyr of the honky-tonk scene, an icon whose every misstep is romanticized. But for those who actually knew him, the story is more nuanced and drenched in sorrow. Hank was a real man who carried real pain in every vertebra, who lost the only father figure he had to a hospital bed, who parted ways with his mother's affections in a swirl of professional exploitation, who soared to unimaginable heights of fame and who crashed just as quickly. There's a sadness underlying every tribute, every statue erected in his honor, every plaque in the Country Music Hall of Fame. Because how do you celebrate the artistry without acknowledging the anguish that produced it? The two are braided together, inseparable. The heartbreak, the spina bifida, the father who vanished, the mother who pushed him too hard, the wife who aimed a gun at him in a drunken rage, the second wife who might or might not have been legally his, the needle that delivered relief and the addiction that consumed him, the bar fight that left him bruised, the final car ride into a frozen New Year's Day when his breath slipped away. These details are not just footnotes. They're the mosaic of Hank Williams, the puzzle pieces of a man whose entire life was as haunting as the songs he wrote. In the years following his death, tributes pour in from every corner of the music world. Country, rock, blues, each genre claims a piece of Hank as its own. Modern-day performers turn to his catalog for inspiration, covering lovesick blues, referencing him in lyrics, or simply channeling that brand of raw, unfiltered emotion Hank perfected. Meanwhile, fans continue to debate the what-ifs and lost possibilities. His son, Hank Williams Jr., later carves out his own monumental career, carrying the name forward while also wrestling with the weight of that inheritance. Grand Ole Opry, which once fired him, eventually reveres his memory, recognizing that their hall would be poorer without his spirit. Museums pop up, countless biographies get written, and a film or two tries to capture the tragic glamour of Hank's life. Yet no matter how many artifacts or stories people collect, there's an inescapable sense that the essence of Hank Williams slips through your fingers. He's more than the sum of the heartbreak ballads. He's the living embodiment of a tortured soul who found fleeting peace in the act of singing. So the next time you hear a Hank Williams track, let it wash over you with the understanding that behind those simple chords lies a lifetime of hurt, anchored in a spinal condition that went unseen at birth, shaped by a father who vanished, a mother who pushed too hard, a mentor who died too soon, a wife who broke his heart, and an addiction that broke his body. Hear the echo of a young boy trying to make sense of a lonely world, the desperation of a man trying to dull an ache that doctors overlooked, the brilliance of an artist who turned heartbreak into anthems. That's the paradox of Hank Williams, doomed from the start by physical frailty and emotional upheaval, yet blessed with a voice that soared above the pain until it couldn't anymore. When he did sing, though, the world stopped to listen. Decades later, we're still listening, still marveling, still haunted, and that perhaps is the truest definition of a legend, someone whose voice, whose story, whose pain and passion refuse to be silenced, even by death.